Welcome back. The Salaries and Remuneration Commission has rejected the collective bargaining agreement signed by the Council of Governors and the nurses. This comes as officials of the nurses union snapped a meeting called late last evening by the Council of Governors. Meanwhile, the Council of Governors is acting surprised that the draft nurses collective bargaining agreement has an inflated figure from the one agreed in January. The chair of the Council of Governors, while calling on the nurses to end their strike, has expressed concern that nurses are demanding 40 billion shillings every financial year in the draft CBA. I'm now joined by Joseph Ngwasi, who is the chair of the Kenya National Union of Nurses, to help put this crisis into perspective. Joseph, many thanks for joining us on the Dawn debate. What will it take for nurses to go back to work?
Thank you. What the irreducible minimum for the nurses to go back on their working stations is assigned and registered collective bargaining agreement as it was discussed and agreed between the union and the employer.
Right. Let's focus on that. As was discussed and agreed, it seems there's a bit of surprise there. Allegedly, the nurses seem to have inflated the figure that was contained in the original draft CBA. Is that something you can clarify, and what was the original figure?
I think the government is playing mischief because the union does not have a mandate to forward the CBA to the SRC. It is the Council of Governors whom we negotiated the CBA with, who are mandated to forward the CBA to the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. Therefore, we are wondering when they are saying that the figures were inflated, when we have been negotiating CBA between us and them, we are wondering how the 40 billion that they are quoting is actually a lie. Because 40 billion, if you do simple mathematics and define it by 26,000 nurses, it is summing up to 128,000 per nurse.
All right.
That is not possible.
So let's focus. So what is the actual figure that nurses were asking for?
The actual figures actually for the CBA is actually 7.2 billion per year. That is totaling to around 28 billion.
So where does this 40 million come from?
I don't know. We don't know why the government is lying to the Kenyans that nurses are demanding for 40 billion when the CBA that we negotiated, actually the whole amount for the 4 years, it's actually 28 billion.
So it's clear that the CBA that was forwarded to the SRC had a 40 billion shilling connotation there. Do you smell some mischief into this? I mean, what could have gone wrong between when you signed 7 billion and the SRC received 40 billion? Okay,
to clarify, we have been negotiating for a CBA from January up to now. And we agreed with the Council of Governors and the County Public Service Boards that the CBA was to be signed on 11th May. The Council of Governors shifted goalposts. The day was never successful. We convened our officials only to realize that the Council of Governors had not forwarded the minutes to the SRC. We remained patient. We set another date, 2nd June. Now, the Council of Governors were forwarding the minutes on the 31st and expecting the CBA to be signed on 2nd when 1st was an holiday. So that is, so you're blaming the Council of Governors for this, but as it stands, SRC has already thrown out the CBA, terming it impossible to implement. What options do the nurses have now? It is very unfortunate for this government to take the nurses for granted, but this time the nurses will not go back unless the government resolves the issues surrounding their CBA. Nurses went on strike last year and called off the strike as an expression of goodwill to start negotiating collective bargaining agreement, which we have negotiated with the government. And the last minute when the CBA is supposed to be signed, now the government are realizing that it is expensive to implement, yet we have been discussing with the same government.
All right. That is Joseph Ongwasi, who is the chair for the Kenya National Union of Nurses. We'll come back to you in just a moment. But remember, we did call out to somebody from the Council of Governors to be part of this conversation, but they declined our offer. The Council of Governors, as we mentioned, is acting surprised that the draft nurses collective bargaining agreement has an inflated figure from the one agreed in January. The chair of the Council of Governors, while calling on nurses to end their strike, expressed concern that nurses are demanding 40 billion shillings every financial year in the draft CBA. Treasury CS Henry Rotich also called on county governments and nurses to execute the CBA without involving the national government. Let's now listen in to what they both had to say.
40 billion, 366 million, 442,400 over and above what was approved in the return to work formula, which is Kenya shillings 3,474,144,000 for every financial year. The above amount will require huge adjustments of budgets for both national and county governments to cater for it.
It is really very surprising to us to see that county governments cannot conclude CBAs. Yet we negotiated the salaries with the nurses, what was to be put there. But I understand that there are pressures to change those negotiated salaries to be higher, more than that was there. So probably that is creating the delay in the conclusion, because if they have gone beyond what SRC had recommended, then again it means that you have to renegotiate the salary. But according to us, that salary package that was provided to them in January and was signed off is what should be in the CBA, and conclude the CBAs as quickly as possible.
Crossover live to our reporter Shadrach Miti, who is following the nurses story, to give us an update on the Council of Governors' take on this matter. Miti, what is the COG's stand on this?
Well, Michelle, as you've mentioned and as you've been discussing with the nurses official right there in the studio, from what we gathered yesterday during the Council of Governors press briefing, you would get the impression that perhaps there seems to be some truth and some facts about this entire process that have deliberately been chosen not to be brought out as it ought to. That you get a feeling that either of the party involved in this negotiation and perhaps the final execution of the said CBA seem not to be giving the facts as they ought to be coming out. Remember, originally, nurses had blamed the county government of not being committed to the implementation of the CBA. Now, when the county government came out through the county Council of Governors chairperson and accompanied by the chairman to the health services in the county, that is Kisii Governor James Ongwae, they sounded to express shock and brought out this figure, which they called in their own terms that it was mind-boggling, 40.3 billion shillings, far away from what had earlier been discussed and agreed upon. Now, according to them, they say what seems to stand between the execution of this CBA and giving nurses their dues is this 40.3 billion shillings. And remember, when you listen to them, you get the feeling that perhaps there is a deliberate decision maybe to confuse everything surrounding this. Because on one hand, the nurses are giving a different figure. On the other hand, the county governments are giving a different figure. And to add more on this, the national government, through the National Treasury CS Henry Rotich, and by extension the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, they have expressed shock over the same. That whereas there were negotiations and agreement between the parties, now the National Treasury CS Henry Rotich says, were all the parties stuck to the agreement by January this year, then the CBA, I think, should have been acted upon. But now he's expressing shock at the inflated figure, that is 40.3 8.3 billion shillings. Now, what we do not know, because none of us is privy to the negotiations and what happened therein, but perhaps the nurses officials could come out clearly and tell us exactly what they negotiated for and what were the terms, because all along we've always been told that first of all, when they negotiated during the return to work formula, they agreed upon the allowances, where it was agreed that by January, about 60% of the salaries payout, that is 20,000 shillings, will be paid out to nurses working in job groups G up to L, and those working in job group M and above will be given the same amount. That is up to 60%, and by July 1st this year, the remainder part will be acted upon. But now, even as agony and frustration continues to affect patients and the guardians and parents over the demand and the desire to get health services, there seem to be some confusion therein. So we do not know exactly who is saying what and who seems to be giving us the facts as they ought to be. But as it is now, what we know for sure is what the nurses are demanding is far away from being acted upon. For one, the SRC seems to have distanced itself from the same, and two, the Council of Governors seems again to express shock and surprise at how they are going to provide for this figure, for this amount. And three, the National Treasury, CS Henry Rotich, seems at one point to blame the nurses and on the other to blame the governors over the same. So Michelle, that seems to be the confusion surrounding all this. But we are going to follow up this matter and see exactly how the all involved parties in this push and pull shall reach an agreement. Michelle.
Thank you. Shadrach Miti is our man on this beat today. He joins us live from our City Centre studios. And here in studio, Joseph Ongwae, who is the chair of the National Union of Nurses. Joseph, is there goodwill from the medics to end this strike?
There is goodwill for the nurses to end the strike.
That wasn't seen when you snubbed the COG's meeting yesterday.
The COG was calling us for a meeting at 5 to attend the meeting at 6. They expect the officials are seated in the office. Mm-hmm. The officials are serving the members in various parts of the country.
That came hours after you had mentioned that the strike was effective midnight.
No, the COG was calling us for a meeting yesterday at 6 p.m. Mm-hmm.
And the strike was effective yesterday. All through yesterday. So nurses were not doing anything.
Yeah, no. What nurses want is the government and the nurses union have been in constant negotiations from January about the CBA.
Right.
We've went ahead even to agree on the signing date. The government comes and changes the date without communicating to us. And something that I want to put it clear, there is a difference between the return to work formula that was agreed in December under CBA. In the return to work formula, the nurses were accorded 20,000 as nursing services allowance. This nursing services allowance, as far as we are concerned, it was paid once and withdrawn.
All right.
Now, we are wondering what the government is talking about the agreement of January in relation to CBA. That was a temporary agreement that was to end the strike and pave way.
All right, so it's clear that a meeting is crucial. So just to iron out these issues, a lot of confusion there between that return to work formula and the CBA. So do you plan to meet the COG and the SRC anytime today?
We are very ready to meet and sign the CBA, but not to discuss anything outside what we had agreed.
Right.
Yes.
All right. And finally, as we wind up, the national government has literally pointed a finger at the governors for failing to solve this issue. In your view, health is a devolved function, but are the county governments handling this well, or should the national government still take up this responsibility? Okay.
The issue of health being devolved, or the national government taking up the health sector. One, we didn't raise issues before devolution of health. That the government is supposed to have put up structures before taking the health docket. to the county governments. And these are the results. All we are saying as health workers and as nurses is that health sector, the staffs have been taken for granted. And for the nurses to continue expressing that goodwill, the government must also reciprocate the same and accord the nurses their right. Because the nurses have a right as enshrined in the Constitution for fair remuneration, good working conditions. It is not something that we are asking out of the blues.
Finally, very briefly, how long are nurses willing to be out of work?
The nurses are willing to go back as early as tomorrow if the CBA is signed. So the strike can take 3 days, it can take 100 days.
All right.
It can take 1 year, depending on how the government is committed to resolve the issue.
Thank you very much. It is James Joseph Ungwasi, who is the chair of the Kenya National Union of Nurses, giving their side of the story. So he clears up the point. He says the 40 billion shillings that the Council of Governors and SRC is talking about is a complete lie, and that the union is asking for slightly above 7 billion shillings every financial year. He also says there's a lot of confusion there between the return to work formula and the CBA, even from the Council of Governors. So we'll continue to follow up on this report, even as we give you a spot check of the situation in various public hospitals in the country. This is the Dawn Debate at Morning Express. We take a short break, but do stay with us. When we come back, a heated conversation on the political point as we focus on economic sabotage.